first thing we're going to do, now if you took a look in the assignment, there was actually two screenshots. We're only going to deal with one of them. So let's just look at this one here and take a moment to break it down a little bit, because we want to note several elements. One, notice that we've got our content, we've got a footer, header, pictures are on the right, menu on the left, content goes down the middle. Okay? Now, this is really, if you take a look at the HTML, you're going to find that there's two pages, page 1 and page 2. We're going to go ahead and apply the same style to both pages. Okay? The way this assignment was originally structured is we would create one CSS page for page 1 and a separate CSS page for page 2. In this case, we're just going to create one CSS page and have it apply to both. So we're going to simplify it a little bit. If you wish to do the other exercise, by all means, but for time we'll simplify it a little bit. But we're going to use this style here. And we've got top border, and we have a title which has a long line below it, and then we've got our menu structured. So as we break it down, we have our large, which is in the gray, which will be our wrapper. Then we have within that will be our header. It appears we have got 3 columns. There's a couple different ways we can do this, but we have basically 3 columns here. And then we have a footer that goes across the bottom. Straightforward? Everybody got it? So if we stop now, you can all do this?
Are you recording?
Yes, I am recording this. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go to Komodo. This one has already been marked up. So we don't have to worry about putting in all the div tags and IDs and everything. We'll just have to keep them straight so that we work with them. And so let's go ahead and let's take a quick look at the HTML. Okay, body, role main. Probably shouldn't be that, but that's fine. Okay, div ID wrapper. So we got, this is going to be what our grade area. Header, architecture of Dubai. Nav. So this is where we're going to have all of our navigation. Section, main content. Now, this is a small correction. This was done, HTML5 spec was fairly new when this was being written up. This role main, really this main content is where it should be. There was a lot of confusion, especially as the spec was coming into being, and there were some revisions to it on where some of these roles should be specified. And the final conclusion is that it really should be on your content that changes. If it's not the content that changes, then it's really not your main. But we're not going to fix this one, but just for future reference. So we have main content and visuals. Notice in our thing we had 3 columns. Well, navigation would be 1 column. Main content will be a column. Visuals will be a column. You see it? How it's grouped out for us? And then we have our footer sitting at the bottom. So first thing while we're in here, let's update the copyright date so that it's current. And go ahead and switch this to your email address and name. And we'll save it. Now let's go up to the top. Notice it's already got the style sheet line in here. href to by style. So we know what our style sheet's going to be, what we need to create it. So let's go ahead and let's create it. So we will do File, New File from Template, CSS. Make sure that the directory is in the right location. And it's called by-style.css. Okay. I can zoom in. Helps if I remember write the command. Can you see that?
Yes.
What does that mean, the char set?
I am specifying the character set for it. This is actually the default, but I'm just going ahead and specifying it. If you notice, you haven't entered it to date, but I'm putting it there so that you are aware of it. You can specify the character set just like you did in the HTML. If you noticed, here's the char set UTF-8 in it. We can do the same thing in the CSS. And if you're going to specify it, it's only in the first CSS file you load at the top. Nothing can be before it. And it's an error to have it anywhere else. So you don't need to have it, but if you're going to put it, that's where it goes. Okay, well, let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and put this in here. This is how you do comments in CSS. It's a /* that starts it, and then your content goes between it, and you can close it. The beautiful thing is it does not have to be on the same line. So you can build comments and put them across multiple lines. Now in this case the editor nicely put the stars in front of them, but the stars aren't even required to be in front of them. So you can build really nice looking comments right in your CSS. Just make sure the essential part is the open and the close. Notice the orientation of the slash to the asterisk. / to open it, * to close it. If you have anything in your CSS that's a little bit more complex, harder to read, took you a long time to figure out, it's probably a good idea to put a comment with it. I'm a firm believer in comments. I know some people that seem to go by the philosophy, if it was hard to write, it should be hard to read. I'm of the philosophy, if it was hard to write, I want comments on it because I may have to work on it later. So, use comments. Don't be afraid of them. They're a great way to organize your content, keep track of what you're doing, because 6 months later, a year later, okay, tomorrow, you may not remember what you were thinking. And so put it in there. If you're working on, and you're working along and you go, oh, I need to take care of this, but I'm not going to fix it right now, put a comment in there. Just quickly throw a comment in. And when you come back into it, you go, oh, okay, that's where I left off, or that's what I needed to do next. Really handy tool to use. Okay, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the everything, which means to apply this to all elements. Margin 0, padding 0. I'm going to take care of this everywhere. This does mean that I'm going to have to specify it a lot more because I'm overriding the defaults on everything. Okay, so we go ahead, we set the margin and the padding. So I'm overriding everything. I'm going to specify it everywhere. Now, when we take a look at our page, let's go ahead, and I like to do a kind of a top to bottom process. Start at the top, work down, and rough it in. Do the broad strokes, then do the fine strokes. Remember, as long as you're not doing anything where you're overriding elements and dealing with inheritance, the order doesn't really matter. So it's kind of find an approach that works for you. So you can change things up, but I really like to do top to bottom, outer to inner. And that's what I aim for, though you will notice as you watch it sometimes, I don't always follow it, but that is my overall approach that I use. So, starting at the top, first thing up here, let's deal with the body. We have a black line at the top. The body is the largest element. It is the parent to everything else. So now to this point, I haven't talked about applying styling to body, but we can. And it does have a border. And it has padding. Well, by setting the border and padding, the margin and padding off, we are now going to be able to put stuff right up against the edges of our browser window, because it also applied to body. So if you're having problems with getting something to bump up right up against the top like you want it, don't forget that body has some styling on it. So let's go ahead and let's come here and let's deal with body. Border top. And let's make it nice and wide. And pound 333, it's a really dark gray. So we're not quite black, but it's a really dark gray. I'm also going to go ahead and I'm going to set my default font family for the page, because this will be inherited by everything below it. Now I'm specifying 3 of them. Arial, which will be predominantly PC. Helvetica, which will be predominantly Mac. They are almost identical fonts. There are some subtle differences, but they're really close. And then I specified sans serif, which tells the browser if you don't have Arial and you don't have Helvetica, just grab your default sans serif font. Well, the fun thing is, on most machines, the default sans serif font is going to be Arial or Helvetica, but on some of your mobile devices, it may not be. There are some other fonts that are very similar that are used. So let's specify and make sure that it will load something correct, because we don't want it to come up and suddenly specify and start coming out as a serif font, because that was the default for everything. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to specify a default font size. 14 pixels. Switch to Firefox and load it. And we immediately find we have a black bar across the top. Notice our font size went up because we specified a little bit larger. And all of our spacing between our paragraphs and everything disappeared. Because we also zeroed out our margins and padding, we had a list, and notice that we can't see the dots because they're actually outside the area of the page. The UL and LI have default margins, which force them in so that you can see the dots. Since we got rid of them, we can't see them anymore because they're off the page. Okay. My next biggest element that I'm going to have will be the wrapper, correct? Body, wrapper, everything's within it. So let's go ahead and we'll put something on our wrapper. Now, width, this is an area of much debate of what this width should be. With modern computers being of all sizes, shapes, and forms, from your smartphones to your desktops, your widths can range. Current statistics for desktop computers, laptops, is approximately 1366 pixels wide. In fact, anyone here who's got a Mac, one of the small ones, you're probably 1366 wide. Now, my home computer, I have one that's 1600 wide, another one that's 1920 pixels wide. I'm running here, I'd have to check, but probably 1200, 1024. You get down to your smartphones, you might be 800, 600 pixels wide. And then they do scaling. So there's a lot of debate on what this is going to be. I'm picking a width here that is safe. For most things, it'll display okay on your smartphones, it'll scale okay. We could set this at 1200 pixels, we'll hit the majority of the machines out there. But I don't want it to go, if I specify this at 1600, people are going to be scrolling. So I don't want people to scroll side to side. I'm going to choose 1000, which means it'll even work on the old square monitors, because most of those will be 1024 pixels wide. But yeah, what the proper width is an issue of debate. Years ago, it was 800 pixels. Then it was 1000 pixels, 1024. Now they're saying 1200 pixels. And they're saying, well, really, it's any size, and you should just adjust to all sizes. And if you want any entertainment, Google it. We want to center it. So we will use our margin 0 auto. The 0 is saying no top and bottom margins, and the auto says calculate left and right. And we are going to set a background color. And let's go with EE, a little bit lighter. We've got it. Verify. And there we go. We now have our text centered, and notice how all of a sudden our lists appeared off on the left. It's because now there's space for them to display. Have I lost everybody? Okay, well, let's go ahead and let's deal with our header. Let's make sure that we use header. I'll set the width to 100%. Yes?
We haven't changed anything on the top of the initial HTML, correct?
No.
The only thing we really changed was the bottom.
That's correct. Did you make sure you named your style sheet correctly?
Okay. That might be.
And you have it in the correct location?
I'll double check.
Because it should be called the and it should be sitting right next to page 1.
Okay. See if I missed that.
Also, we don't need the pound sign with header.
No. Take a look at the HTML and you'll see that we use an actual tag.
Oh, yeah.
we didn't use.
Oh, wait.
Yeah. So, header, I set it to 100%, and I put a 50 pixel spacing on the bottom. Nav, I set it to 140 pixels wide, float it to the left, and I put a 20 pixel margin left and right on it. So it's not going to be right up against the edges, and there'll be space off to the other side of it. Main content, which is going to be my next column, we'll set it at 550 pixels. We'll also float it in left. And I will put a little bit, put 10 pixels between it. So the question is, how much space have I put between nav and main content? How many pixel space is there? Take a look at the margins. I've got a 20 pixel margin on the nav and a 10 pixel left and right margin on the main content. How much space is between the navigation and the main content? 30 pixels, exactly. Because they're going to be sitting next to each other, so you just add them up. So we've got, yes?
Would it have made a difference if you did hashtag header or hashtag header?
They have to match. Did I do it right? Yeah. Yeah, they have to match your HTML. In your HTML, notice there is not an ID. We use the ID tag header.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, for main content, it's in a div with an ID of main content.
Right.
And nav is a nav tag.
Okay.
So we have to keep them straight. Now, our next column we've got is going to be visuals. Which should be an ID. Oh, aside ID visuals. So we got two choices. We can do it off of the pound visuals, or we could use the aside tag. We can do either one. I'm going to go ahead and just do the pound visuals. But we could do it right on the aside. Set a width, 200 pixels. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix my float lefts and float rights. What it's going to do is it makes it so I don't have to compute the spacing between main content and my visuals. It will kind of auto do it, which means that it may be a little bit different. So I'm specifying a 20 pixel margin between them, which should put 30 pixels between main content and visuals. But if I did not add up everything correctly, it might be a little bit more. So it's kind of a slough space between them. Because to calculate our full widths, nav is 140 pixels. And then we have got margins of that on 20 pixels, so we've got 40 pixels left and right. So our navigation is a total of 180 pixels wide. Our main content, so we had 180. Our main content here was 550, and we got 10 on each side, so that makes it 570. And then we've got our visuals, which was 200 plus 20, so we got 240. And that is going to equal 7. Anyone really fast? Let's see, 0, 1, 7, 8.
900. 990.
990. Okay, that add up. So 990. So basically, we've got an extra 10 pixels to play with, but I wanted to make sure that my visuals were on the right. So my actual space between visuals and main content is going to be 10 pixels wider. Okay, does that make sense? By mixing my float lefts and my float rights in this case, I'm saying I've got some space here. I'm going to let it just kind of pick up my fluff space. It'll look good because I really want my visuals to be firm right. The other approach would be to do the math, get it right, and put it in pixel perfect. So let's go ahead and go back, refresh it. And what do you know? We have got 3 columns. Now we've got a bit of styling still to do to this to make it look good, but it's there. We got one more major block to deal with, and that is going to be footer. Let's make sure we've got it named correctly. Yep, uses just footer. I want it to be full width. Just calculate it. I'm going to put a clear on it just to guarantee there's no floats. Because if you take a look, notice how my footer got jammed up here onto the right? You kind of followed the last float. It said, well, I got space, so it just slid into it.
I have problems with that. In my assignment, my footer would just go all over the place.
Yep, it will. So we're going to fix that.
So that's how you fix it? It's just a clear thing?
Yeah, clear it.
Just put in a bunch of breaks.
And then let's go ahead, we'll center the text. And let's put a border on top of it. Give it a little bit of color. Save it. Take a look. And then we go, our footer's at the bottom. And it's centered. And I have a typo in here. There should be an ampersand, not an @ sign. Now it's correct. Corrected the HTML so that it was ampersand copy, not @ copy. And it replaces that with the HTML entity, the copyright symbol. And you can't see it. Let me blow it up for everyone. So I did make one other correction in here. Switched it to ampersand copy, semicolon. At this point, we can start just working our way across the page. We have all of our main elements roughed into place. So now we really want to just start going through and saying, okay, we've got that in place. Let's start building it out. Have I lost everybody?
A little bit.
A little bit?
Could you go back to the
I- Yeah, I'll go back to the CSS.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay, sorry. I was noticing some lost looks.
Can you go up to the header tag real quick? I just want to make sure we got that right. 0050. Alright.
Notice I'm using the short form of it.
Yeah.
I could have used margin bottom, and just specified it there.
Yeah.
You got that now? Because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with the menu. And this is what some of the fun stuff that we can do here. So I'm going to deal with the menu because I think it's fun. But honestly, at this point, we just need to start working through the finer details. I could start with the header. I could start anywhere in here. But I'm going to do the menu because I think it's fun. We have, let's take a look at our HTML and let's take a look at our navigation. We are using an unordered list. We want to get rid of the dots and we want to space it out so it looks more like a menu instead of just a list. Lists are kind of boring. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're going to turn off the dots. And we're going to set a list style type of none. That gets rid of the dots. We could specify other list style types if we want. There's a number of different ones. You can even use images for in your list styles if you want to get fancier. The next thing we're going to do, because we want to put some spacing, is we're going to deal with li elements. Now, I am only wanting to deal with the li elements of those that are in the unordered list. Okay? If I really wanted to play this safe, I should say nav ul nav ul li. Now I'm only going to deal with the unordered list that is in the navigation. That way, if we have any other unordered list somewhere, we don't change how it appears. That make sense? Let's get specific on it. In this case, we only had one, so we would not find the problem until we introduced another unordered list. And let's go ahead and let's put some padding on it. 15 pixels, top and bottom. Nothing left and right. Now, it's a menu. We have got anchor tags in it. So I'm going to adjust the behavior of the anchor tags. I want to make sure that I put some padding on the left. That's going to push things in just a little bit. Text decoration none. This gets rid of the underline. So let's take a look at what we've got. Let's make sure that this is looking reasonable. And you'll notice we have now taken and spaced out our list. The dots are gone and it's spaced. And I've got one other line that I forgot to put in here. Border bottom. 1 pixel dashed. Pound 900. And then I'll show you why we put the padding on the And now we have our menu. Nothing happens when we roll over it. It's just kind of there. So we put the border on the LI. Now, the reason we put the padding on the A tag, the anchor tag, was so that we could get this spacing. Okay. Now we could get fancy with this and we could throw some other attributes on it so that when you roll overs and things like that, using the hover attribute and so forth. We're going to keep it fairly simple for right now. And we really should validate our CSS and make sure that we don't have any typos. It's a good thing to do every so often. Fail fast. It's easier to find your typos early on than it is if you wait till you're clear at the end. Okay, let's go ahead. We've got some other global settings that will make it look more interesting. Let's take a look at that image that we're aiming for. And we've got our links, we got them spaced in. Color's wrong. No, so we need to still set the color on it. We have no spacing. We need to put spacing between our paragraphs. We got some decoration to do to our header tags. So let's go ahead and let's take care of those. Let's go ahead. We'll set our colors and set our general ones, and then it'll start coming together as we come on it. You see where I'm heading? Do you see how I'm breaking this down? My goal is to try and get it so I can see where I'm going, because it makes it easier to take the next step. Big steps, littler steps, little steps as we refine it. So let's switch back here. And let's go ahead and let's do our P tag. And we'll set our line height, 1.5 pixels. So basically we're adjusting it so we get kind of like our spacing between lines in the wrap. Let's go ahead, since we're here, we'll set some colors. Margin bottom, 10 pixels. So we've got our line spacing by adjusting our line height. If we set it to, did I set that correctly? No units, sorry. It looked wrong, there was a typo. See, I even make typos. Line height, 1.5 lines. So we're doing half line spacing. If we did it line height of 2, we would do double spacing. So we can adjust it. Then I'm going to put my spacing at the bottom of my paragraphs, margins, and my ULs, OLs. I'm putting some spaces on them so that they're spaced out. Load the right one. Oh, and things collapsed all over the place. Guess we got a little bit more work to do. Which means also finding out if I have a typo. But we'll work through it. Let's go here. Set stuff on our fonts, headers. And never forget, when you're doing your fonts, to specify the default. And we're going to make our headers uppercase. Let me see if I've got a typo. Page 1. So our H1, we had a line underneath it, so we just put it on the border. On our H2, we had that nice colored block off to the left, so I specify a border left on it. Put some nice padding on it. So specify some colors. We're just kind of decorating it. That's all we're doing. We're just going through and decorating it. Then we're going to find out why my text collapsed. There it goes. It's looking an awful lot like our goal, isn't it?
All my other spacing looks good. Whatever.
Did you see how those changes, it just popped it into place? It's kind of surprising as you apply some of the attributes how fast pieces will suddenly appear the way we wanted them. And notice that we were not having to specify every single one. When we did the paragraph, it applies to all paragraphs. Now there are some shortcuts that we could put in here, like padding. I could have done padding, which one would this be? Top, right, bottom, left, so padding left. So I could have done this as padding left. You could argue that padding left would be clearer. I quite often do it this approach just simply because I find it more flexible. When I go to change things, I don't have to rewrite the line. Well, let's get our links looking right. And I'm going to do a shortcut. No, we'll type the whole thing out, and then we'll simplify this. We'll do these two approaches. Let's see if we can simplify it. Now notice, I'm doing hex numbers, but I'm only entering 3 numbers. This is equivalent, when I do 900, This is the equivalent to it. Okay? So when I only enter it as 3 numbers in a hex thing, it's because both numbers are the same. I could enter it as 990000, and then you get all the numbers that you're used to seeing. Or I can simplify it and make it easier to type. So again, it's just a shortcut. The other may be more right to do. If you find it confusing, it's just a shortcut to try and make it a little bit faster to write. And I personally think it's a little cleaner to look at. If I don't need to see all 6 digits, this is easier to type and look at. So, a::link. Let's do a::hover. What are these colon tags? Anyone remember what they're called? Pseudo tags. They're dealing with specific attributes of the tag we're talking about. So we're trying to adjust specific parameters of it, and then we've got colon active. Well, okay. Let's take a look, see what we've got. We've now got our links in there, color changed. If we roll our mouse over them, notice how they change colors. And if you visit them, they're going to have a slightly different color as well. In this case, they just go to Google. So let's go take a look at and see if there's anything that can be simplified on it. Link, well, that's what I'm clicking on. It's 900. Hover, 333, it's gray. Active, 333, it's gray. So that's when I'm on that particular one. Actually, that's when I'm clicking on it. Sometimes what you can do, if all you're doing is adjusting it, say on the hover, is simply put the color on the A, and then we'd only have to enter the hover color. In this case, we're specifying all the states that A link could be in, but we could have also just specified the color on the A tag and then just deal with anything that changes it from that state and specify it. In some cases, it can significantly shorten your code. We have, whoops, it's not pound. We have a link in our footer. We wanted to deal with it differently. Text decoration none. If we look at it, notice that we no longer have a line under A. We turned off the text decorations here in the navigation, so there's none there. But they are underlined down here in the body of our text. Did you see how we specified the differences? We go back to the CSS. In the footer, I turned it off, but only in the footer. That's the reason I specified it. up here in the navigation, I turned off the text decoration. The default for an anchor tag is that it has an underline. So I turned it off only in the places where I did not want to see it. And it got rid of it. Okay, let's take a look at what our goal is. We need to get borders around our pictures on the right. And it looks like our titles here are going to be in navigation, are going to be in italics. And then we've got an element that can't be seen. So let's take a look at our Firefox. We've got it. So we've got our headers, they're looking right. We need to deal with this ordered list in here, get it spaced in. And we need to deal with the pictures on the right. Which one do you want to deal with first? The ordered list, so that paragraph looks basically finished? Or do you want to go ahead and start dealing with the visuals? Doesn't matter to me.
Ordered list.
Ordered list? Let's get that looking basically finished? Okay, let's do that. So, we have an ordered list. You're going to find this is really nice and simple. We're going to put a margin on the left-hand side, and I'm going to change the style. So instead of numbers, it's using letters. Save it. Command S is the shortcut for save. Refresh. And instantly it lines up. Now, any idea where I got that, what that margin should be? Now, I have a cheat sheet that I'm looking at, but where did I figure it out? I'll show you. When we were building our contents, we already know that we spaced it in the 10 pixels. So we already were in. So I know that I've got to move it at least 10 pixels. Then, I'll be honest, the next one, I tried it until I got it to line up. But I knew that immediately I was going to have to move it minimum of 10 pixels because of how it was positioned. But honestly, came down to I entered several values till I found it. You can look up and find out what the default push out is, and that'll give it to you as well. But okay, that's ordered list. So I guess we can go ahead and try dealing with our visuals. And let's see, our visuals. We called the whole section visuals. Each one is called figure. And within that, we have a tag called fig caption. Now, these are HTML5 elements, which is a wonderful thing because before HTML5, you would have pictures, but you had no way to tell what the caption was. And so a non-visual browser, had no way to know, oh, this is the caption attached with this picture. Invariably, what you ended up doing was putting in a picture and then putting a paragraph, and then you used the CSS to style it up against it. But there was no way to link the two. HTML5 solves that problem for us very nicely. Now, you'll also notice there's something in here which I do not like C. Notice it specifies a width and a height in here. We're going to take this out before we're done. This is something I don't want to see in any of your HTML. Width and height. You can use it temporarily to help figure things out, but after that I want it gone. If you're going to specify it, it needs to be in your CSS. I do not want it in your HTML. Better yet, make sure your images are the correct size. We're going to talk about optimizing images, and when we do, this is one of the big things we're going to deal with, is making sure that our images, if we want them to be 180 pixels wide, well, then let's make our pictures 180 pixels wide. Don't make them really large, because remember, the browser is going to have to download this. And if they're really big, you're pulling down a whole bunch of data that you don't need. Secondly, now the browser has to resize them. And I don't care what smartphone you've got, but it doesn't have nearly the horsepower of your desktop computer. Well, unless you got a really old desktop computer, in which case it might be more. But aside from that, so if we have a really big picture and we're resizing it on the client side, all of a sudden our browser not only has to pull a bunch more data than it needs, it then has the extra work of resizing the image. So we will talk about it later, but optimize your images. If you know what the sizes are going to be, set them. Now, a trick that I do use, I may not know the size I want the image. So I might come in here and use this width, height settings in my HTML. Figure it out, then I optimize the image and I remove them. The second thing to note is I quite often will not use both width and height. By specifying both of them, if my image is out of proportion, I can squish an image. So I can make it taller or skinnier and change the proportions on it. If I want to keep the proportions, only specify one of them. So I really care about width. Well, I'll specify width and let the browser proportionally do the height on it. That making sense? You follow what I'm talking about here? Well, if not, we'll cover it again. So width, height, 180. They're each within a figure. And we have an image and we have a caption. So we can come in here and they're all within pound visuals. So we only want to mess with the ones that are in pound visuals. And I'm going to find my cheat sheet here where I've got it, just to make this a little bit faster. Oh, there it is. Okay. You get to see me actually do it the right way. I'm not finding it in my cheat sheet. So, pound visuals, image, big caption. We got a border around the image, so let's go ahead and let's put the border around the image first. So visuals, let me make sure I got it right. Pound 903. We're going to put a 1 pixel border around just the image. Now I could shorten this down just a little bit. Pound visuals, figure, image. Well, I only have images within, so I really could remove figure and say we're just going to deal with the images within visuals. Or I can be very specific. It doesn't matter. Caption. style, italic. Let's take a quick look, see how we're coming. Oh, border's not quite enough. We need to put some more spaces between them. So let's go back to it. Let's make this 2 pixels wide. The caption, we probably want to put a margin bottom. Let's put 10 pixel margin bottom on it because I want to put some spacing on it. Margin top, I'm actually going to do something strange. I want to pull it closer to the image. So I'm going to use a negative margin. Let's take a look and see what we get with it. Well, I pulled it a little close, but I'm going to take it extreme. I want you to see how this negative margin works. Let's make this 15. Notice how I'm actually able to take that and start overlaying it right into my image. Which means I could do a negative and put it clear to the top if I wanted. In this case, I really don't want to do that. 5 pixels was too close, so let's do 3. Okay, that's closer. Font size. Yeah. Let's just do small, which is a proportional. Yeah, shrink it down, or we could come in here and say that we really want to do it. Let's do 0.8 EMs. There we go. We now have borders. We now have our fonts a little bit smaller. We tightened them up and they're italicized. Let's take a look at our goal image. I don't know, I think we got pretty close. What do you think? We potentially could put a little bit more space between them. Yep, we need to put some more space between them. So, we did 10 pixels. Let's go 20. Save it. Switch. Reload. Oh, there we go. 20 pixels around it. And we've got it.